Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday. What a beautiful day. Let's see if anyone is actually watching today because it's such a nice day. Ah, Chloe's there. Wonderful. How are you doing? Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming in on such a lovely day. It is absolutely gorgeous outside. Hope some of you have got a garden that you can enjoy the lovely sunshine in. And it is Palm Sunday today. Palm Sunday. So we're going to be doing a little bit of churches and things today because, you know, tenuous a link as it may be, we're gonna do a little bit of that. Hello, Fernando. So yeah, that's what we're going to do today. I've got my Wonder Woman mug today, which my tea has been ably made for me by my glamorous assistant, who is my housemate, who you're going to meet today as well. It's kind of grey in New Jersey. Oh, that's a shame. You're in New Jersey, so you know, can't complain, can you really? Hey. Well, I hope everyone is making the most of their little allowed outside time, going for runs or walks or whatever, but also not being silly about it. So let's keep everyone safe today. All right. I think we're going to have very few people today, given that it is such a nice day, but we're going to go for it anyway. Right now, today, I am thrilled because I have a guest, and it's a very different type of guest today because this is how different the guest is. She's actually here. This is my very reluctant quarantine buddy. This is my lovely friend Becky Clark.
I moved in before the quarantine started. I
couldn't get away.
I had no idea.
She's no idea who I am, really. So this is Becky. She is the director of churches and cathedrals for the Church of England. So she was a perfect person, and basically, you know, I said to her, well, you're here, you have to come on something. So she hasn't really got a choice in the matter. And it's Palm Sunday today, so we've decided to rope her in. This is, by the way, a service that the Church of England provides. They issue you with a member of staff. You'll all be getting a bishop shortly. If you haven't got one yet, check your front porch. They'll be out there.
Hide behind the couch until they go away.
And your brother's on as well, yes. Simon. Hi, Simon.
Hi, Simon.
Hi. So what we thought we'd do today is, very tenuously with Palm Sunday and, of course, Easter next weekend, we thought we'd do a little bit on churches in the City of London. Yeah, she's trapped. Yeah, I know she is, Emma.
And I know Adrian Harris too. He's absolutely marvellous. Church of England's digital team getting a shout out there. Doing incredible work at the moment.
Are they watching? Is that?
No, that's somebody who knows them.
Oh, someone who knows them. Oh, fantastic. Yeah, they're all working incredibly hard. I have to say, the last couple of weeks when I've been doing my silly Instagram stuff, Becky's been in the far room, basically making the world go round. So I'm very impressed and incredibly humbled. So she's not getting a day off today. She's coming in to talk about churches in the City of London, which is for us guides. Whenever we guide in the City of London, it is fantastic because there is so much history there. It goes back. It's the oldest part of London. It goes back about 2,000 years all the way to the Romans, and as a result, the churches there are fantastic and have lots of little secrets and all sorts of fun stuff. So what we're going to do today is take a little trot through about 400 years of history in about 20 minutes. And then we'll pick it up again maybe next week, possibly, and do a little bit more and kind of look at the churches and how they develop. Because Becky has a theory, don't you, that...
I do have a theory.
You cannot tell the history of Britain without churches.
Prove me wrong.
I'd rather not. So I'm going to hand over to Becky, who's going to start us... Well, let me bring up a little map to start with. We've got your sister-in-law, Ashley, as well.
Hi, Ashley. Hi, Caroline.
I love that they're both watching in the same house, but hey, never mind. So this is a little map of the City of London. This is, if you remember, we talked about this in the Great Fire of London with Laura. Ignore the red section because that's the Great Fire bit, but the black line around, you can kind of see going all the way around here, is the extent of the City of London. So the churches in there are some of the oldest churches in London. And as a result, they're really interesting. So we're going to start with, we're going to go all the way back to the start. Rewind.
Yeah.
Back to the Romans.
Back to the Romans.
Back to the Romans.
Well, the Romans left Britain in 410 AD, and there wasn't that much of a gap. Actually, it was about 150 years, but in you know, geological terms, it's hardly any time at all, until the Christian presence started to be felt. Before 1666 and the Great Fire, within that black-lined area, there were 96 churches, which even me, very keen on churches, might say was a few too many.
Rubbish.
Absolutely. So 86 of those were destroyed in the Great Fire, and then 51 were rebuilt. And we often think it was Christopher Wren who did lots of rebuilding, but actually there were several other big architects like Hawksmoor who worked with him on that. and of course St Paul's in addition to that. So even now, if we put up a map of what the city looks like in terms of its churches today, they've still got 46 open churches and 2 churches that sit there as ruins, and 46 of these still offer daily worship. Across the whole of the country of England, the mainland, we have 42 cathedrals and 16,000 churches, and they're incredibly diverse. They're all very, very different, but just right now they're all the same thing, which is shut, for good reasons. But the last time we shut all our churches was 1208, so we're a bit out of practice, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
That was when King John got himself excommunicated.
Oh, that was very careless.
Yeah,
Did all the keys still work though? That's the...
They absolutely do. We're very hot on that.
Good.
So just to focus on the city, because we've tried to talk about all the churches in the whole of London, we run out of time, but just to talk about the city, the earliest church buildings that survive in the city aren't actually that old in terms of being complete fabric. If we bring up St Olaf's Hart Street,
A glamorous assistant will try and find.
Absolutely, it's just keep going,
keep going. Which one have I got? This one here. Yeah. Here we go.
This is a church building. It's one of the older churches, but the majority of that building, quite a lot of it's now 19th century, I have to say, but the majority of that building dates from about 1450. But because of the Great Fire, that makes it quite old in city terms. But the church on this site goes back to Danish origins, and it was actually founded by the Vikings in the 10th century. So you get this weird dichotomy where you've got a very old site and a relatively new building a lot of the time.
And we see this kind of across the churches throughout, really, don't we? And in the majority, what we're talking about today is these old churches and how far they go back. But it's so hard to find. You know, we're talking about a sort of an invisible history because they're not there anymore. Bits of them are there, but there's so many churches where you won't actually see the original church there at all.
Yeah, so you really are having to go on a bit of a treasure hunt, a bit of an archaeological expedition. Some of the churches you can see bits of Roman sites underneath them, somewhere like St Stephen Walbrook, which is an amazing church in the city, but right next door to it is the Mithraeum, which is obviously a pre-Christian site, a Roman site, which you can go and visit for free because Bloomberg moved it. It had been moved and they got moved back to under the new Bloomberg.
It's fantastic,
building.
The new site, and it's free to go and visit. It's wonderful.
So the sites of worship and the sites of Christian worship often converge. The first time that the City of London had a sort of known Christian presence goes back to 601 AD, and this was when Pope Gregory sent some missionaries. He'd already sent one lot off to Canterbury. They founded Canterbury Cathedral, which just sneaks in a bit older, 597 AD. I know, just beating us on that.
Devils.
Fair enough. But Gregory sent missionaries to found the 2 provinces of York and London. It's now Canterbury and York. In 601, and Ethelbert, who was sent by Gregory.
Great name, love it.
It is absolutely bring back Ethelbert.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone looking to name a puppy, I think would be particularly. Imagine shouting that in the park.
That'd be fantastic.
That'd be great, wouldn't it? He founded St Paul's, but not the St Paul's we know, and not the one that is known as the Old St Paul's either. It's one that actually was 2 churches before that. It may or may not have looked something like this.
May or may not. That's the wonderful kind of get out of jail free card. We have no idea, but it could have been this.
Absolutely. If anybody's seen Eddie Izzard's sketch on archaeology and how it's basically all made up, this is the cutting edge of that. This is a church building. It may or may not be the church building we're thinking of. But it was probably this sort of basilica style because that's what they would have known coming over from Europe, and particularly in this very early post-Roman era. The first Bishop of London is another great name, Theodore of Erkenwald.
Oh, now, hang on. If Russell is watching,
yep.
Russell has a thing about Bishop Erkenwald. He's always loved it. When we trained together, he's a fellow guy, we trained together, and he went on and on about Erkenwald to the point where we told him to get a room. I don't know if he's watching today, but Russell will be able to tell you anything you want about Erkenwald. You'll know it anyway. But
this is marvellous, absolutely. We'll do an Erkenwald special coming soon, folks. So this line of bishops is quite amazing, actually. This was founded in the very, very early 7th century. It's completely unbroken right up until the present day. And the current bishop is Sarah Mullally, Dame Sarah Mullally, who was chief nurse and is now Bishop of London, something of an overachiever and an absolutely amazing woman. So this line of bishops goes right back to this very early stage. And this church at St Paul, that Church of St Paul that we have nothing left of. It's been destroyed and built over not once, twice, 3 times, at least 4 times.
We've got a little question from Julia. So it says not Mellitus.
Mellitus. Not Mellitus. Well, this is the thing. A lot of the very early origins are quite confused. So there's a lot of different things that what people say about when the first bishops were, who it was, which is the earliest church, which is the earliest site. A lot of these things they're not completely clear because written records from this time aren't always brilliant. So we could discuss Mellitus specifically, but there's actually quite a lot of different sort of competing possibilities.
We'll have another special on Mellitus coming up.
Absolutely. There's also a competing claim for which is the oldest church, or at least the oldest surviving church.
Yes, now us guys, we will always talk about this lovely church here, All Hallows by the Tower, which is right next to the Tower of London. And in fact, it has a board on the outside and on its website. It says the oldest church in the City of London. And I think it's founded in something like 675 AD. But Becky refutes this, don't you?
But not personally, you understand. It's a very
everything you know is a lie.
Absolutely. Very brilliant church. You should all go see it.
It is wonderful.
Among other things, a very sexy Saxon arch. So you know.
Oh yeah, let's bring up the sexy Saxon arch.
If you haven't seen
Hold
one,
on to your hats, people. This is going to get sexy.
Whoa.
Woohoo!
I mean, look at that.
Check that.
Look at that brickwork. We love it. There we go. So it is definitely a very old church and a very old site of worship. But 675, well, actually, if you're thinking about the founding of Old St Paul's, or the old St Paul's in 601 or around then, actually we're probably looking at churches existing since then. What All Hallows probably can say is that it's got the oldest bit of church architecture that was built into the building. So there are churches in the City of London that include reused Roman materials, things like that. But this is probably the oldest originally built for the church architecture in the City of London.
So it's the oldest bit of church.
The oldest bit of church.
We're going to have to change the sign. We're going to go down with an aerosol can and say, yeah, the oldest bit of church in the City of London.
I get this is sort of people's favourite questions to ask me. What's the oldest cathedral? So, well, the oldest cathedral is Canterbury, obviously, but the oldest bit of cathedral is in Ripon, up in Yorkshire, because it's got an Anglo-Saxon crypt. So you have to be careful what you ask for.
More sexy stuff.
Absolutely, always ask the right questions. So. We have all these this line of bishops, and they actually set up a house, not in the City of London, but quite a way away at Fulham Palace. Now, if you haven't been to Fulham Palace, I absolutely recommend you should go. We've got a picture of a much later bit of it, because it was actually established in about 704.
So well trained now, look at this.
So impressive technical support. This, of course, is Tudor.
Yeah, you can see all the tricks with bricks there happening. That's classic Tudor.
Beautiful. A bit there for Caro.
Tudor bounce, yeah, there for a bit for Caroline there.
But this was in 704, Bishop Wold here was the Bishop of London, and he established this huge estate. Fulham Palace used to cover most of Fulham, Hammersmith, Acton, Ealing and Finchley.
That's huge.
It were massive.
It were reet grand.
It were reet grand, and it had the longest domestic moat in the country.
They haven't seen my moat.
Moat fans.
Moat fans. Moat bounce.
So, and among other things, Wold here, who was bishop in this very early 8th century, wrote the oldest parchment letter still surviving in Western Europe and these things. When it reopens, go straight to Fulham Palace. Absolutely wonderful place.
You've been told.
And a later Bishop of London, who we've heard mentioned on this brilliant series before, was Dunstan, later Saint Dunstan, who was bishop from 958. And of course, we've heard of him because in a previous talk, Alex has talked about St Dunstan's in the East.
Yes, we talked about it with Laura in the Great Fire of London, and I don't think I've got the picture to hand, but it was the one that had been destroyed in the Great Fire and then kept as a lovely green space and had kind of been overgrown and is just a gorgeous little spot in the City of London for a kind of a time out in the hustle and bustle.
So 3 churches dedicated to Dunstan in the city.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bit of a dude.
He was. So things then, as they do when you start to get, a bit blasé about it, we had a few churches and everybody sort of went off the boil a little bit, and it took Alfred of Wessex recapturing London, or capturing London in 886, to really sort of reinvigorate Christianity and the building of churches. So he caused St Gregory's to be built, which was a church which is now part of the site that St Paul's is on. And he also had to be built St Peter ad Vincula.
Aha! Now
this is fodder for the guides.
This is fodder for the guides, and she's desperately trying to find the picture of St Peter ad Vincula. I'm going to give 10 points to somebody, whoever the first is in the comments, who's not a guide, to tell me where St Peter ad Vincula is. This is a picture of it. It's a place that us guides go to regularly. We are there. It's funny because we've been talking a lot in the last week amongst ourselves about how much we're missing guiding, how much we're missing being out in London at the minute. And this place here is like an old friend. Has anyone come up with it? London, Camilla. Yeah, all right. I'll give you. You can get 5 points for that. Rubbish. Tower of London, says Caroline. Well done, Caroline. Yes, it is in the Tower of London. This is part of the whole. Oh, there's another Caroline coming in with the tour. Sounds a bit Dutch. I'll give you that. Yeah, so it's within the actual Tower of London, and when we get Moira back in maybe a week or two, she's hopefully going to do us a virtual tour of the tower. We probably won't be able to go into the church, but we'll get a look. And so for us, this church here is like an old friend, because us guides are there. I mean, I think last year there was 1 week where I went to the tower, I think 6 times in a week. One day it was 2 times in a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. So we know this really well, and it's a wonderful church with so much history.
Yeah, well, we recently staged a hostile takeover because for nearly 500 years, St Peter ad Vincula had been administered under the Tower of London, and we recently realised actually technically it should be under what's called faculty, which is the Church of England's planning system, which is what I run for its churches. So they're now ours again.
You're trying a land grab, aren't you, Becky?
I'm not trying. There's no trying here. The do or do not. There is no try.
Yeah. She is going to be our new overlord at some point. I'm just going to warn you about that.
It'll be much better. So we have all these amazing churches being built in this period. Now, a lot of them, again, the actual building you go and see today, very little will survive from this 9th century we're now in. But you will be able to see some of the origins of it in some of these buildings. It's always worth having a look, seeing if there's a cellar, seeing if there's a crypt you can go and look in. Someone said any blood spilled. I presume that's in the land grab. No, all good coups are bloodless.
There are bodies everywhere, Mitchell.
I mean, there are, but that's just archaeology. It's fine. It's fine.
Fair enough.
They're meant to be there. It's okay. We've just had to excavate a whole load of people, about 10,000 people who were buried up at the burial ground near St Pancras, who had to be excavated and properly re-inhumed in order to fulfil canon law as part of the HS2 project. So,
oh, really?
Yeah,
which is the new high-speed train link, which may or may not happen. We'll see.
I do. We actually do literally know where the bodies are buried. There you go. One of the other churches, she has to live with me.
Yeah.
One of the other churches that was built in this period under Alfred of Wessex rule of London is St Helens Bishopsgate, and the photo we've got of this I love because it shows this kind of the Gherkin. I'm just going to put this out there. Not my favourite.
I like it.
Building, but it's not the
worst.
Like it. Yeah,
it's definitely not the worst.
It's definitely not the worst because that is the cheese grater in that building. Is then the walkie-talkie.
No, it's the walkie-talkie. It's the walkie-talkie for me.
Yeah, that's a close run thing. We do because we're very cool at work. Sometimes we do a kind of competition to say, well, what you can get back any historic building you want, but you have to lose the one that's currently on that site. And despite wanting to see, what the Roman amphitheatre might have looked like, or what one of these destroyed churches might have looked like, we always land on no. We go for whatever was on the site of the walkie-talkie, because then we wouldn't have to look at it anymore.
Wow,
so,
she can hold a grudge, and in particular against architecture. Julia's saying 2 naves.
2 naves, yes. So St Peter's.
Are you talking about us?
St Helens Bishopsgate is a really interesting church, and it's worth going and having a look inside. But it's also interesting on the outside. It's got still got bomb damage from an IRA bomb. It's obviously got this amazing setting right in the centre of the city with the Gherkin behind it. And it still has. Somebody's asked, what's the future of city churches? Are there services without parishioners, or do they become more museum-y? Places like St Helens are really showing that actually you don't need to be in a place where there's lots of people to have quite a lively congregation, a lot of people coming in and travelling. Because the city still today has the most churches per head of population. It's got 1 church for every 200 people, even after quite a few of them were destroyed and never rebuilt in the Great Fire. So there's an awful lot of churches, and you're right, some of them are maybe a bit more museum-y in the sense that they're open for people to go and enjoy the peace and quiet, the beauty of the monuments, rather than necessarily to go to a service. But there is a lot of life in city churches and a lot of congregations which are growing there. But
of course it's weird because in the city there are very few people that actually live there. So on a Sunday you haven't really got... So the congregations tend to be in the week, don't they? Yeah, more so than a Sunday, which is quite unusual, really. Yeah,
except the biggest growth in Church of England congregations is midweek. People want to be able to pop in at lunchtime or after work and things like that, and it's especially true in the city.
Dominique's saying that she used to work opposite in the building that was blown up by the IRA, which I have a feeling is Dominique's chat-up line, but, I mean... Danny asks, what's the average annual running cost for these city churches? Now, I don't know if that's something you can tell us and then you'd have to kill us, or, I mean...
Well, they're all charities, so they do their returns and things like that. It really does depend. In terms of the buildings, obviously these are owned by the priest, known as the incumbent. So the buildings belong to the people of that parish, and the people of that parish have it vested in their incumbent while he or she is in charge. And so you don't have to actually sort of pay anything in terms of ground rent or anything like that. We own the land of these churches. The running costs are huge. the capital cost of trying to stop the places falling down, and then all of the money that you might want to put into things. Somebody said there's a good cafe in Cheapside. Yeah, there is. There's a brilliant cafe, and there's a great cafes and things like that in a number of
lots
churches.
of them, yeah.
These are trying to generate revenue to keep the buildings going and to put money into things that the other churches do, which are outside of services like night shelters, food banks, shelters for things like domestic violence, meeting places for Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, all those kind of things. So there's an enormous social purpose. In the 16,000 churches of the Church of England, there are 33,000 social action projects going on.
It's amazing.
It's incredible. So there's a real wealth of people willing to put their time in, and a lot of the money raised for these churches does go towards that, as well as towards these incredible historic buildings. So the costs are quite a lot, and if anybody wants to make a donation, you can send money my way. I promise it'll get to the good place. Yeah. Yeah.
She's going to spend it on gin.
Yeah, probably. But Blackburn Cathedral has its own gin, so you can combine interests.
I'm going to need some of that. Religious gin.
Okay, so we're in the 9th century. I'm determined to get us at least to the 11th century before we finish today. So we're going to have a reappearance of Dunstan. I know somebody earlier said he was the patron saint of goldsmiths and silversmiths.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
No, I didn't know that either.
I didn't know that.
I know.
So Dunstan founded, when he was alive, obviously, he founded a small monastery, one of his 3 churches in the city, and they had this monastery outside, on a little island on some marshy land just outside the city. Now, Edward the Confessor, when he became king...
Who we've heard about.
We've heard quite a lot, and we'll hear more about him, because he's such quite influential. He didn't have the best relationship with the City of London. The City of London was very powerful. The king wasn't quite sure that they always deferred to him as they should. And so he decided, I'm going to build a church dedicated to St. Peter, some echoes of the Vatican here, and on this rock I shall build my church, Peter the Rock. He decided
Except it was on this swamp this time.
Well, he found the rock in the swamp, didn't he?
A rock in a swamp.
Yeah, so there's a metaphor in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So he built this church. He reformed the monastery Dunstan had founded into what we can see here, which is actually not what Edward would have known, but Westminster Abbey.
Now, this picture, we should point out, is definitely not a photograph. This is not accurate by any stretch of the imagination. But this is Thorney Island that you can see sort of, going around, all around there. The building right in the middle is a sort of vague version of Westminster Abbey now, but this is totally not what it would have looked like at the start. We're going to do one on Westminster Abbey at some point. I haven't planned that, but we'll do it. But yeah, that's a kind of a Gothic cathedral, which is not what it would have been there when it was first founded.
Yeah. So this was happening. Edward the Confessor started work on Westminster Abbey, or what would eventually become Westminster Abbey, in 1045. So there we go, we've done it. We've reached the 11th century, and we are being able to sort of see how some of the original buildings of the city, even though they don't exist anymore, really helped to shape both the understanding of faith and Christianity in the city and in England as a whole, but also how they shape the current ways of the city, the current layouts, all of those existing churches. So they may have been rebuilt by Wren and Hawksmoor and his compatriots after the Great Fire, but their foundations go back so much further. And from all over the world, certainly all over Europe, you have people coming in, building these churches, working on them, who've worked on churches in across France, Italy, and later on in Scandinavian countries as they come in with the Vikings. So this is a multicultural city from the off.
Yeah, and that's where we're going to leave it today, but we're going to pick it up probably next week, which will be Easter Sunday. I'm going to have to try really hard not to let Becky take it over and do a 4-hour sermon, but we thought we might do a little bit more on churches because, as she says, and hopefully you're starting to see, the history of Britain cannot be told without the history of churches, and in this case it's just the City of London, but they have a really big bearing. So we're going to pick it up from the 11th century next time. Yep. We're going to push forward and we're going to find some of the interesting little secret bits. Fernando loves trapped Becky. Yeah, she really is trapped.
I mean, who's trapped here, really? Who's really? I got a lot
we're going to see who's going to come out of this alive at the end.
Absolutely.
One of us may not make it. Anyway, that's going to be it for today. Thank you all for popping by. What have I got to tell you? Nothing really. At the minute, just all the usual fun stuff that's going on. I'm going to be back tomorrow at 3. It's going to be just me, and I'm going to be talking about some of the really interesting, weird and wonderful names of London streets and digging into that a little bit and seeing, because that was a request that we had. So we're going to do that.
And before we do go, I just wanted to say there's a very good article which I think Alex is going to link to by the Archbishop of York designate, and this is in the Spectator this week, and he's talking about how weird it is for Christendom to be having Easter Holy Week, which this now is, without churches being open. It's a very good read anyway, but one line particularly struck with me. He says at the end of his article, said, "There's nothing good about this virus." I think we can all agree with that. He said, "But that doesn't mean good things can't come out of it."
Exactly.
Connecting with all of you is a brilliant, good thing to come out of a bad situation, so thanks.
Wonderful. So yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Becky. If we haven't killed each other by next week, she'll be back. Yay!
Fingers crossed.
See you tomorrow at 3.
Bye.
Bye.